Hello, what is going on, everybody? It is another episode of the Money Talk. I'm your host, Billy Zerillo, where we talk about all things money. We talk about relationships, we talk about divorce. We're going to talk a lot about all things money because life really encompasses a lot of different things. It's not just one thing, it's not just this thing. It's how this interaction with money uh, interacts with the rest of your life, and that's super important. And I'm really excited today because we have a special guest on. I love the power of social media. You meet people, you have the same mindset that you want to help people in this type of way. And so we're going to bring them up here in a second. But before we get into that, if you are watching this, just make sure you drop who you are, where you're coming in from. And if you're listening to this, hey, make sure you share this with your family and your friends. There's always some good nuggets on here to take, regardless of your situation. But it's always good information, especially when we get to bring on a special guest. So, but like I said, I'm super excited to bring this person up and to learn a little bit from them, what they do, their experiences. We're going to have a lot of good questions, and then at the end, we'll always give you the ways to reach out to this person if you want to learn more about their services, to learn more about them, what they do on a one-on-one basis. We're going to give you that opportunity. So, without further ado, I'm going to bring up our special guest. Her name is Sharri Freedman. She is a relationship and divorce coach. Without further ado, let's bring her on stage. What is going on, Sharri? How are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to have this conversation because I think, the intersection of money and divorce, and these are topics that people avoid talking about. So I'm super excited to be able to chat with you about both of these things today.
Yeah. I'm super excited for it too. I'm always excited to connect the dots, so to speak, because I think people can get in those silos of like, hey, this is this issue, this is this issue. They're separate. They're really not. Everything's like I said in the beginning, like everything we do is so intertwined with other aspects of our life. So I'm really interested to get your take on all that. And just really quickly, again, to give kudos to social media, right? We connected over LinkedIn. We scheduled a call. We got to know each other. We found a lot of synergies, a lot of same thinking, and so that's what kind of led to this podcast episode. So again, I'm super appreciative of that. So let's get into it. So, as I said before, you're a relationship and divorce coach. What inspired you to become that, to start this business?
So I am trained as an attorney. I still hold my license as an attorney, and I practiced family law for 17 years.
Hmm.
And I have been a coach. I kind of had a pause for a while, did some legal blog writing, did legal contract work. My kids were growing up, and then several years ago, I discovered divorce coaching, and I learned a little bit more about it and took a intensive certification. Loved it. Realized this is the missing piece for so many people going through divorce, and something that I'm really good at. So I started my coaching practice, and then more recently I became trained as a trauma healing and energetics coach, which also marries uh, nervous system regulation and transformational mindset coaching with my legal knowledge and expertise to really help clients navigate before, during, and after divorce, because the emotional and practical piece is so important. And like you said, when one aspect of your life is kind of out of balance, everything is out of balance. And so it's really being able to tap in and help people to bring themselves back in balance so that they can thrive and not just survive during arguably one of the worst times of your life. You can still show up as the best version of you.
Mm. I love that. I love that. It's something that I talk about a lot, especially with working with divorced, um, divorced people, divorced entrepreneurs, um, and it's that sense of, like you said it right. It's a very trauma filled situation. Now, I've never experienced divorce as a married person, but I experienced divorce as a child, and I know what, even though that traumas might be considered on a different level, it's still trauma, right? At the end of the day, it's still, you're still experiencing that. And what I love what you said is kind of almost redefining who you are, past that, because like you said, it's such a traumatic event. It's your life is changing to something different, and often you're probably asking those questions of, who am I, right? I was a wife for 15 years, I was a mom for 25 years, and I was this, right? So um I just love the fact that you talk about, like, doing that, right, figuring out those types of things, so to speak.
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned, your experience as a child, because what I've discovered working with my clients is that although I work with individuals, the impact that my work with my clients have on their families is just it's so incredible to see how when you can show up as the best version of you, it impacts your children and then it impacts their children. So this is like breaking generational patterns
Ooh.
way beyond your immediate situation. And when I begin to see that as I follow up with clients years later, to hear the stories of how they're still using the work that I share with them to help as they navigate new um, relationships and as their children get older and life ebbs and flows. It's not this static straight line. You're going to have good and bad. And when you're able to manage all of that and not get derailed by it, it really helps you to have the life you desire and deserve and not fall into the trap
Mm.
of, why is this happening to me and poor me and living in that victimhood. You really are able to step into your power as the hero or heroine of your life.
Yeah. And that's ultimately, and I might, speaking, I always tell, the clients and the people that I talk to, is like, I'm not the hero of your story, right? That is you. I'm just happened to be the person that's got the map that's going to help you get to where you want to go. But ultimately, the decisions that you make and stuff like that are going to ultimately lead you there. And something you also said that's really important: breaking the generational just pain and trauma that comes along with that divorce, right? I think I was very lucky in that sense, that back then, but that was almost 22 years ago, right? When my parents, more than that, when my parents got divorced, my mom didn't have any of the resources that they're out there now, and so she was just doing whatever she could, right? And so I always think it's lucky of me to maybe not have dealt with those things. I've dealt with those things as a kid, and was able to overcome some of those. But like you said, I think, and I would love to, I don't know the stats on this, but I would love to see the stats on, divorced parents, what their children end up doing with their relationships, right? I'm sure it's a high divorce rate on their end, right? And relationship problems and stuff like that. But being able to, like you said, like, get in front of that and take care of me first, put my oxygen mask on so I can take care of my kids, right? I think that's so important.
So important. And so many people, when they first come to me, a lot of my clients are people pleasers, right?
Mm,
Putting everybody before themselves. And so it's really uncomfortable to even suggest to put yourself first. It feels really selfish, but it is essential because and what if you're not filling your tank so that it is overflowing and you have so much to give, you're draining your tank and you're running on empty. And so many of the people that I work with come to me and they're on empty and they keep going and going and going. And it eventually they will burn out. Just like your motor on your car, right? If you don't fill it with gas and you keep on going, it burns out. It stops running. And so you have to continue to fill your tank, and the only way to do that is to put yourself first. And by putting yourself first, you're actually doing your kids a service. It's a gift. When you think, "Oh, I have to put my kids always before me," you're doing them a disservice.
yeah.
Staying in a marriage that is toxic, where you are unhappy, because for the quote sake of the children, which so many people do, is doing them a disservice. And I don't know the statistics, but I have talked to children of divorce that are now adults who said, my parents stayed way too long, and now they are angry because it's like you put all of that on me, the child. You stayed because of
Wow.
me, and that is such a heavy weight for a child to carry.
Yeah. Even when they become an adult, right? Like I know kids that I grew up with and their parents were married for 35 years and then on the 36th year they just get a divorce out of nowhere it seems like, right? And it's just like, and they find out it's like, well, all that was a sham, right? All that was, just smoke and mirrors, and I feel cheated, right? In that
Mhm.
sense, like now I don't get a chance to heal the way that I want to heal, right? I have to now, because now these people have families, they have a husband, they have a wife, they have kids, and now they're trying to unpack all that and now raise their family and unpack the situation that their parents just put them in.
Yeah, I see that a lot.
Yeah. Um, so let's talk about this, right? So we kind of hinted on it a little bit. You kind of described it, a little bit, but let's talk about, because there's a lot of different ways to coach somebody, right? There's a lot of different personalities. There's a lot of different people in the world. A lot of people respond to things differently. But describe the level or the approach that you take to coaching somebody that says, "Hey, I need your help."
So I bring, my wealth of experience and knowledge, having practiced family law, that analytical attorney mind. I don't give legal advice, but it's really helpful to have that intuitive sense of something doesn't sound right. Maybe you need to go get some answers from an attorney or from a financial person where the client might not recognize that, and I have this ability to be able to guide them where they need to go if I don't have the expertise to help them, or if I'm not able to. So while I might have the legal expertise as a coach, I don't give legal advice, and I make that very clear. I'm also trained in mediation and the collaborative process, so I understand from the inside how this all works, which can be very comforting to clients who, when you come to divorce, when you make the decision or the decision is thrust upon you, um, you've never done this before. You're not expected to know how to do it, but yet so many people think, "Oh, I'm just going to figure it out," and they kind of bumble along, and they can make a lot of mistakes. So, what I do with clients is really meet them where they are. So, whether they are thinking about divorce, right? Should I stay? Should I go? And really helping them to come to a decision and then confidently choose to stay, and then what you need to do in order to be happy, or decide to go without regret, and how to do that in alignment with who you want to be. So the
Mm,
work that I do is always focused on who are you becoming? Who is it that you are going to be at the end of all of this and beyond? And so we do that using visualizations and meditation and a lot of self-care that isn't, bubble baths and massages, although those are nice. And I do suggest that people indulge a little bit in that. But it is really that inner work of really discovering and healing what needs to be healed as you move through this, so that at the end, you know who you are, or you are in a good place on that path of discovering who you are, so that you can, as you move into that next chapter, really do it with confidence, with grace, right? And in alignment with your authentic self.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. Kind of like living your life on purpose, right? Rather than chance and luck and all those other things, right? Like, we'd rather, there's that old saying, control what you can control, right? And you can control, you know, how you approach this journey, right? You might not be able to control everything in the journey, but you can control how you show up and in how you process this, in a sense. I thought that was really impactful what you said. Just living life in alignment, right? So many people, you know, go through life completely out of alignment, unrelated just to even to divorce, right? Just people that are just experiencing life, live life out of alignment, and they wonder why they don't have the money that they have, or they haven't lost the weight that they wanted to, or they don't have the job that they want, or anything like that. It's if it's not aligned with your purpose, the values that you have, the why that you have, you're going to feel like you're, like an uphill battle, right? I think you would agree on that sense.
Absolutely. I say you're sleepwalking through life. Day after day after day, it's the same thing over and over. And you say you want something different, but nothing changes if nothing changes. And it's the fear of stepping out of that zone of familiarity. It's the fear of like, oh, I'm out of my comfort zone and it's really uncomfortable. And our system, this is about the nervous system regulation. If you're not able to regulate your nervous system, if you're not able to recognize, oh, this is resistance, oh, this is fear, your system is going to do everything it can to put you back into that comfort zone, because it's safe there. It's safe in the familiar, but there's no growth there. You don't grow in the familiar. The only way to grow and the only way to heal is to be able to step out of that zone of familiarity into the unknown that is super scary, and then make it safe to be there. And that is what I help my clients do. It's getting them to figure out, what do I want? Because I don't tell them what to do. It's like, what do I want? Do I, if they are in the position to decide, do I stay or do I go? Right? What is it that I want? If divorce has been thrust upon them, right? They've been blindsided, their spouse has decided, I'm done. You don't have a lot of options there if your partner
Yeah,
doesn't want to be married. So then it is like figuring out, okay, what do I want now?
yeah.
And
Who
you
am I
said,
beyond it? Yeah,
yeah, and you said, about control, and a lot of this is about control and what is in my control. And for so many people going through divorce, they want to that control piece is driving them, and it's like sand slipping through your fingers, because at the end of the day, the only thing you have control over is you and how you respond to outside circumstances.
yeah,
And it's a matter of, am I reacting, right? Is it that knee jerk reaction, which usually doesn't end up the way you want, right?
yeah,
Or is it, am I able to step back and consciously recognize what's going on, and then make choices, again, that are in alignment with who I'm becoming, and respond respectively, right? When you
hmm
can respond to a situation, your outcome is different than when you react. And I'm not saying that the outcomes are always going to be positive,
No, yeah,
but what I teach my clients is, when you take radical personal responsibility for your decisions, you don't defer to other people, you don't let other people guide you, right? Tell you what to do. You make the decisions after you've done the inner work. Even if it doesn't go the way you wanted, there's not regret, or there's not as much regret, because you made that choice. It's not like, now when you don't make the choice yourself, when you let your attorney choose, or you just default to your spouse, I'm done, I can't deal with this anymore, fine, whatever you want, I just need to be done with this, which you probably have seen this a lot, right? Where it's just like, fine, I'm done, whatever, I just have to be done with this and I'll figure it out later. There's usually a lot of regret and blame, blaming the financial person, blaming the attorney, blaming their ex, but not taking responsibility for the fact that they deferred all of their decision making to other people.
Hmm. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. I, I, I really resonate with that in the sense of like, talking about, control, like from a place of confidence is where we all want to be. But I feel like, what you said, like, taking that onus on of saying like I am in control is really like a double-edged sword. It is very scary, especially if you haven't done that inner work. You're like, oh my God, how can I do this? Like, how can I make this all happen? Like, and then that's where the burnout comes. You're like, your mental capacity, your emotional capacity goes to zero. And that's when you finally get to that point where you're like, I'm done. I just can't handle it anymore. Do whatever you want. Just make it go away. I'll handle it. And then on the other side of that coin, when you do that inner work, I think people don't realize that when you do that inner work and you get to that point of confidence and being able to make those decisions, it is freeing. It is freeing knowing that you have control in that scenario, that you can be like, you know what? Like, I'm making this decision. I'm not, I'm making it with confidence. I'm doing what's in alignment with me and where I want to go. Like, even like you said, even if it doesn't turn out well, right? Even if it's not the ideal situation, you can say, I made that decision and it was me that was making that decision. It wasn't Sharri making that decision. It wasn't Billy making that decision. It wasn't the lawyer or my husband or my spouse or whoever it was. It was me, authentically me. And I think that what people don't realize is that by doing the work, the freedom on the other side of that coin is really impactful.
And I love that you brought up the word freedom because my signature group coaching program is called Liberated. And it's named that for a reason, because when you go through this framework that I teach to my clients who work with me in the group setting, at the end, they are liberated, right? They are free. They have that sense of letting go of the things, the old patterns, the old default limiting beliefs, all of that is gone, and they are free to be who they authentically are, and they understand where they are headed. And so, yes, so I love that you use that word, freeing and freedom. And for my private clients, it's the same thing, that sense of, working towards who you are, who you're becoming so that you can be free.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's what we strive to have in aspects of our lives, because it allows us to be us and allows us to experience life in a different lens. Instead of always reacting to life, we can experience it. And especially when you have kids involved, you want to be able to make memories with them and not just be constantly in survival mode. So I want to bring up this because obviously this show is called The Money Talk, right? And if someone with a unique background like you, like I, being a lawyer, have practiced, in that realm, and now being a coach, right? As well as I do, money is a huge topic in this realm, right? And so, money is a major topic in divorce. And so, how do you help? I feel like, how do you help your clients heal the relationship with money? Because, like, there's so many different facets to divorce. There's the single mom that didn't make any money that is now going to have to go back into the world. Maybe there's the business owner that was once, before the marriage, was a thriving business owner and was, did what they want and stuff like that, and now trying to regain their confidence back. So, talk a little bit about that, like specifically related to money, and like how you interact with your clients when you're talking about that relationship.
Yeah, that's a really great question, and you're right. It is really important to be okay being uncomfortable talking about your money. That goes back to that, things that we don't like to talk about, divorce and money. There's a statistic out there, I don't remember the exact percentage, where women would prefer to talk about their own death than talk about money. It's crazy, right?
It's crazy. That's nuts.
And
Think
so, you
about.
know, what happens a lot of times is, you know, you put your head in the sand and pretend that it doesn't, you know, oh, I don't need to think about it, or I don't want to think about it. And for a lot of women, they, even women who are highly educated, who maybe have their own businesses or are, you know, are career oriented, or even if you were and are now a stay-at-home mom, what happens is a lot of times they defer, they fall into these roles where their spouse might be in the one who manages all the money, and it's just easier, and life goes on, and they, you know, forget about it, and then divorce happens and they don't know. And so one of the things that I would say, this is a little bit different than what the question that you asked me, but I really want your listeners to know is, talk about the money, know where the money is, understand what you have and what you don't have, right? Understand your debts, understand what assets you have, really be aware, especially when the marriage is good, right? If you're listening and you're like, well, I'm not getting divorced, right? Have those conversations, because even if you don't end up getting divorced, accidents happen, death happens, and to know where the money is so important. But going to your question about how do I coach clients with their relationship with money, it really goes back to that inner work. And what we do, you know, we work on our beliefs and we go backwards. I take them back to
Mm,
identify without, we don't relive, we go back to gather information. So, unlike with a therapist who goes back and unpacks and unpacks and unpacks, which almost all my clients work with therapists, I think it's very healthy to have a therapist. I take my clients back to just discover, oh, isn't that interesting? And gather the information and then come forward. And then we work on rewiring the neural pathways to new beliefs. What do you want to believe about money? What do you want to think about money? Because our thoughts create our feelings drive our actions, and our actions ultimately create our results. 100%
mm,
of the time, it's this thought loop. And so
mm-hmm,
what I teach my clients is that you can take anything on that thought loop, the thought, the feeling, the action, the result, choose something different and re engineer the thought loop. So if you take a different action, how does that make you feel? And when you feel that new feeling, what are you thinking? And when you're thinking that, what's the result? Right. And it immediately changes everything. So that is a lot of the work that I do with clients around any belief that they might have. But specifically to your question, if there is this lack and scarcity mindset, which comes up a lot, not just in divorce, but especially in divorce, to really get to where is that coming from? And then a lot of times it is that little girl or little boy that has developed this belief around money, right? Maybe they heard their parents arguing about money, or maybe they were given money and lost it. They hear other people talking about, oh, that, you know, people with money, they're bad. Or maybe your parents were successful, but their parents weren't. And so there's that, you hear that conflict of like, oh, well, they're too good for us, or you're not
mm,
good enough, right? There's so many stories about money that we develop at ages 0 to 7 that we don't even realize are then imprinted in us. And then we carry them forward. And then when you realize that and you're like, oh my gosh, makes so much sense why I'm doing the things I'm doing, because of the stories that I'm believing to be truth when they're not, right? And then undoing that and again, building those new neural pathways to create those new beliefs around money, and create those new narratives that will propel you forward instead of keeping you stuck.
wow. That is amazing. I follow that same process. Thoughts become beliefs, beliefs become your actions, and your actions become your results. It's something that I tell clients all the time. It's something I tell myself all the time. I always say I can't control my first thought, but I can control the second thought that I have. Something that I remember when we first talked that we had a lot of synergy around was talking about the history of our money, like how we grew up with money, how we interacted with money. And it's not to go back and like you said, that's for the therapist to unpack everything and stuff like that. But it's really to gather that data to say, like, what led you to where you are right now? Like, how did you get here, right? So that we can look at those things and say, is that the person that you want to still be, to still make those the same decisions, or do you want to be somebody different? Okay, well, you want to be somebody different. What would a different person do, right, in your situation? And asking those questions, right, and starting to develop that purpose, right? That why, like, hey, this is why I want to become this person, because I want to feel security. I want to feel freedom. I want to be able my kids to experience the life that I never had. And it's really interesting because, like, in my sessions, I share my personal story with money. Like, I shared it with you. I grew up with a scarcity mindset. My parents, all my earliest memory, right, as being a child was, I love both my parents. I'll say this, right? A caveat to this, but I don't have childhood memories like most kids do. Like, I remember my parents fighting about money and fighting all the time. And so what did that happen? That happened to me. I led to me to having a scarcity negative mindset around money. Money was something to be feared. And I feared money for a really long time until I got, older and started learning and surrounding and surrounding myself with people, and then understanding that that's not who I wanted to be anymore, and having true ownership of that past and say that's not who I want to be anymore, right? And I think that's kind of what you're saying here is looking at your past to say, hey, I don't want to do this anymore, taking ownership of it, and then what am I going to do to move forward, so to
Yeah,
speak.
and for so many people, they don't even realize that piece, right? They don't
Yeah.
they don't have the insight. They're not that they're unconscious, right? They're sleepwalking, as I said
Yes.
before. And so it's like when you wake up, your eyes are wide open, you can't unsee now. And so now it's like, now what do you do? So it's this conscious, it's making conscious choices. It's going to like conscious living. You had said something about being present, right? It's being present and not defaulting. For so many of my clients, they want to be present with their children, but they feel like, oh, my mind's going a million miles a minute, and I'm thinking about so many things. I'm with my kids, but I'm not actually present with them. And so being able to really be conscious of, where are you and what are you thinking? And are you thinking the thoughts that are leading you towards the person you're becoming? Or are
Yeah.
you thinking the thoughts of old you? And just
Yeah.
being aware and recognizing it, and it's not a magic pill. It's not a switch where once you do it, you're like good for you're golden. It's it's why it's called the work. You have to work the work. And this work works 100% of the time when you work it, and it is lifelong. I work the work every single day. And
100%.
I'm not perfect. There are days where I get caught in my old drama and my scarcity and lack mindset, and I didn't grow up with with scarcity, but I grew up with people judging, and we weren't super well off, but like we were my dad became a doctor, and for in my family and his family, he was the first one, right?
Oh,
The
yeah.
first one to
Yep.
really have a profession like that. My grandfather ran a grocery store, and his brother and sister didn't, they were successful, but not they weren't a doctor, right? And so, oh, the doctor. And so then it was like, there was those you could feel the judgment around, like, oh, they're too good for us, kind of thing, which was not the case. But as a child, you pick up on these subtleties, and then I realized years later, like, how that impacted me in never feeling good enough, right? Where do
Yeah.
I fit if I'm not, with the people who are making tons of money, and I don't fit there, and I don't fit with the people who aren't, right? Like, I don't fit anywhere. It's just so interesting. And when I realized that, I was like, oh, this is such a BS story that I told myself, right? And then when you can start to unpack that, and use it to move forward, it's magic.
Yeah.
It's freeing.
Yeah. I could tell when you were telling that story, like, you could tell the little bit of the old you, right? Like, hey, I can feel this box that I'm in, right? When it came to, like, the outlook, right, of just everybody around me. Like, oh, my dad's a doctor. and then you were like, oh, now I'm a lawyer. Like it probably led to a lot of those choices because you're like, I have to be something, of this title, right? It's about the title and it's about the image of the title, right? And so I've run into so many people like that, doctors, lawyers, business owners. They have this title and they think that they need to live up to that, but they really just need to be who they are, authentically who they are. And that's what, uncovering some of that stuff, in that conversation, talking about your history of
Mhm.
money and like what were your earliest childhood memories, right? And why did you choose the profession that you're in? All these things we get into it. So
I
I
think
think that's really important.
if it's okay, if can I share something that just kind of came up when you were
Yeah.
mentioning all of that to sort of tie it into what we were talking about before about divorce and money. One of the big things that keep people stuck is the fear of losing the lifestyle.
Yep.
So you go from a pot of money in one household, and now it's going to be that same pot of money isn't changing. At least it's not changing right away, and now it's going to have to support two households. And for a lot of people, that's really scary. And not knowing, right, the uncertainty of like, well, what's going to happen? Am I going to be able to continue to do all these things that I love doing? And for a lot of people, they make the decision to stay unconsciously without really thinking through. When you can step back and think through, you might decide to stay. And if that is the case, assuming there's no abuse going on, right?
Yeah.
You might decide to stay and then you can work on how can I be happy? I've made this choice and now I get to choose to be happy. And people miss that step of like, "Oh, wait a minute, I can stay and be happy?" Really? And you can. Or you can go and be happy. And really if you look at it and you're able to like eyes wide open and be like, "Okay, what is it about the lifestyle that I'm worried about losing? And am I really going to lose it? Or is that just fear driving me to stay the same?"
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's making up a scenario. We all do it, right? We all think about the 10 different scenarios that possibly could happen if we make this one choice. And it's that fear of the unknown. That's like, okay, well, is this real or is this not? And then I love what you said too. It's just like choosing happiness. I think that's what it comes down to
Mhm.
is whatever situation you are in, whether you're deciding to go, choose happiness, right? If you're deciding to stay, choose happiness, because that ultimately is making the best decision for you in that moment.
And I think, what it's a saying that's probably, I don't know, I'm losing the right words, but money doesn't buy happiness. And I think that is it's true, right? You really need to go within and discover like why you're unhappy or what makes you happy. Money is a part of it, perhaps, but it isn't the be all end all, right? People with tons and tons of money are unhappy. You might be in a marriage,
Yes.
right? And you're living the life, right? You have this gorgeous house and you have the cars and the three kids and like the lifestyle, right? The life, but you're unhappy. And so you really have to really go within and figure out like, am I okay with this? And if you're not okay with it, then you have to do something different because again, nothing changes if nothing changes.
100%. I love that. Nothing changes if nothing changes. I think that's people just think, oh well, if I start thinking a little bit differently, maybe it'll all come together. Or if I just wait long enough, if I'm patient long enough, things will change, right? Things will get better. And it's like, no, you have to put the work in. Yeah, regardless of whatever decision you're making, right? There's work involved in that decision. You're gonna have to do it. Um, so moving along that same path as far as the money topic, right? What are because again, you have such a unique kind of experience compared to other people that might be a coach in this realm. You know the legal side of it, so you know those battles, right? You know the mediation side of it too, right? You have that experience as well. So it's really a three-sided experience, and you have the emotional side, right? As being a, and you might correct me if I'm wrong, but like my dad was a lawyer, and I've gone, unfortunately, had to go to some, court proceedings with him and stuff like that before, which is never a fun. I guess that's why I never ended up as a lawyer. I was like, there's no way I'm doing this, right? But there's not a lot, there's emotion in that, but like for the lawyer, it's really trying to take the emotion out of this, right? This is the legal framework, this is the law, this is what we need to follow, this is how we divide the assets, boom, I'm done, right? So to speak. So, but again, going back to your level of experience in these three realms, what are some common financial mistakes you see or have seen clients make that maybe the listeners could hear and be like, okay, that's something I need to be wary of, to maybe not go down that route.
So there's so many.
Yes.
One is using your attorney for all things, right? Using your attorney as your sounding board, as your therapist, as your financial advisor, as your coach, because attorneys are expensive and they aren't skilled. They'll be happy to sit and try to help you and listen, but they're billing you for every minute, for every email, for every text message. So that's a big mistake. Like people will run through their retainer before much has happened and they're like, what the heck is going on? Like we've barely done anything. And it's because they've used their attorney as their only or one of their only resources in the divorce process. So that's a big one. So really investing in your team, even though it feels scary and might feel like it's really a lot of money, you're actually saving money, time, and your sanity when you build your team. Another one that I see happen a lot is really getting attached to the home and not allowing yourself to look at options in the sense of, can I really afford to keep the home? Um, because in a lot of cases you might not, right? In the immediate, it might seem doable, but when you like look out 3, 5, 10 years, it actually may not be a wise choice. And what often happens is people give up retirement assets, often, not always, in exchange for the ability to keep the house in offsets and things like that. And they're not apples to apples.
Yep.
And oftentimes the person who keeps the house doesn't have their own retirement or it's much less because it's usually the woman and they haven't maybe they were a stay-at-home mom or they took a job that was part-time or they weren't working to their full capacity because they had children and there was that offset that worked when they were together, but now that you're not, right? And so when then you give up retirement assets in exchange for the house, it might be a good swap, but it might not be. And what I see happen is people do that without getting the information because of the emotion of it. So really being able to look at that, that's a big one. And then also on the line of retirement, even if the house isn't part of it, what I hear over and over is, well, he worked so hard, it's really his retirement. I don't want to take that from him. And what they don't stop to look at is, what were you doing all those years where you
Yeah.
weren't earning money and you weren't putting into your own retirement? And when they can step back and realize like, oh, wait a minute, it's not me taking his quote unquote his retirement. And I'm saying his just because of who we both typically work with. I mean, it could be reverse, it could be
Yeah.
hers, but for purposes of our discussion, right? So what were you doing? What's the value of all of that work, quote unquote, that you were doing to maintain the house, to allow your spouse to have the retirement that they have, to go to work, to build their business, or to do the job that they have, right? What were you doing that wasn't earning any money? And when they can step back and really look at that, so that's a big mistake that I see people make. Another one is not having credit in your own name.
Ooh.
A lot of people are the authorized user on credit cards, which does not mean you are not building credit. The authorized user, the person who owns the credit card is the person building the credit. And so when you go to get credit in your own name, if you do it after divorce, you might have a really, really difficult time if you've never had credit in your own name. So it's really, I'm shocked at how many people don't have their own credit card. It's their spouse's credit card and they're just an authorized user. And then your spouse can cut you off, right? They get upset, they cut off the credit card and you don't have access to a credit card.
Yeah, control.
So yeah, so those are things that just, I mean, we could probably talk for hours about it, but those are ones that I think are top of mind for me.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I always preach that too, is having separate credit cards. And I preach it from it because I have plenty of couples that are happily married and stuff like that. And I always preach it from the sense of like each, you have your own line of credit. I have my own line of credit just in case somebody's credit gets messed up, right?
Mhm.
Something happens, something happens to the house, whatever, right? Identity theft. If one person has good credit, right, then you always have an option to do stuff financially anyways, right? So that's that. But then on the other side of that, if and when, if a divorce is imminent or whatnot, like that's a good, you think about kids, they run into that issue all the time. Like, having no credit is worse than having bad credit, right? Like,
Mhm.
having no history is worse than having a history of, or having a low credit score. And I love the fact that you said, like, a lot of people I run into, the thing I hear about, especially about keeping the home, right, is, am I keeping the home for me, or am I keeping the home to keep the status quo for my kids? Right. And I'll tell you this, like, for the most part, because I was a child of divorce, at the end of the day, the house didn't matter. Right. Like, it didn't matter. It's the people inside the house that matter, is what
Yes.
makes a home.
I love that
Um,
you said that. Yes,
yeah,
100%. And, will they be upset?
probably.
Probably, right? Just like if you had to move, if you weren't getting divorced and your family was moving, your kids are gonna be upset, right? They're human. They get to have their feelings, but at the end of the day, like you said, they're gonna be okay. And they're especially gonna be okay if you're okay, right?
Yeah.
If you make it okay. And, sometimes it may be painful. Divorce is painful. There's no way around it. And people want to avoid the pain. And what I say is there is no way to avoid it. Divorce is painful, but suffering is optional. It's the
Ooh,
suffering, right? And so what I help clients do is realize they don't have to suffer.
man. If that was ever a big mic drop
Mhm.
ever in the history of podcasts, that was it, right? You don't you what was it again? Pain is going to be there, but
Yeah.
but you
Divorce
don't
is
have to.
painful, right? Divorce is painful. Pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional.
Wow, that was, man. I am going to steal that and use that as much as I can, because that was really, really impactful and powerful. I'm so thankful that you shared that. What we're gonna do now is I'm gonna ask the last question here, and then we'll kind of get into, how people get in a hold of you and stuff like that. So we talked about the financial mistakes, that people make. What are some things that people can do, um, to just weather that initial shock, right? That initial, like you said, some people see divorce coming a mile away, others don't. They're often blindsided. So what are some things that people can do initially when they get that information? And you can tie in some financial things in there as well, if you want. But just what would be your recommendation, I guess, in that realm?
So I think regulating your nervous system is going to be key, right? Because that initial shock, um, your lizard brain, right? Your fight or flight, that sympathetic nervous system is like whoosh, right? You're like in that like, oh my God, fight or flight. What do I do? And so being able to regulate your nervous system to get to a place of calm so that you can make clear, rational decisions is going to be really, really important. And what I suggest to clients is to do just some breathing, because breathing can stimulate the vagus nerve, which brings your
Mm,
sympathetic to into that parasympathetic. And it can be simply as simple as putting your hand on your heart, closing your eyes, taking a deep breath in, count to 4, hold for 4, and breathe out for 4, and just repeat that several times. And then think, okay, what do I need to do? Right? Who do I need to contact? Having a divorce coach is a really great first step. A lot of people run straight to the attorney, but sometimes they get into that. Yes, it's important to have the legal knowledge. And I always, always, always say, please have a consultation. And if I can, I offer, referrals and things like that, because you have to know what the law says, but you don't necessarily have to start the quote battle, right? Of hiring the lawyer and serving your spouse and going that route immediately. Oftentimes that jacks things up. Really being able to get clear on what it is you want and who you're becoming and all of those things will help you as you move through, rather than once you're in that like jacked up state, it's hard to come down off of that, if that makes sense.
yeah, that makes perfect sense. It's, I use a similar breathing technique. There's a Navy SEAL breathing technique. They call it the box, right? So
Mhm.
just visualizing a box and breathing, each line
Yep.
does the same thing as
Yep.
what you're talking about, the 4 seconds and stuff like
Yep,
that.
it's the
So,
444, the box.
yeah, yeah,
That's
the box. Just,
it's called
but I
box
think for
breathing, yeah.
yeah, and I think for me too, like any situation, like visually seeing that box ultimately calms me down.
Mm,
Um, and
I like
and
that.
and and then always I always go back to, especially because I write my goals down every day, I write my why statement down every day, and I think for me. And one of the things that I do with my clients is we develop a why statement, especially really geared towards finances in that sense, but it also illuminates who they want to be as a person and what's important to them. And I think in that, like you said, getting back to that logical part of your brain, right? And I think that statement helps a lot of people remember what they were thinking about when they were in their most logical state, right? When they were thinking clearly, when they were thinking about what they wanted, they can go back and be like, here's an anchor point, right? This is a reminder, right, of where I'm going and who I want to become. So, but I love all of what you said, because I think that initial shock could be, could just send you to make really bad decisions, like you talked about before. Nobody makes good decisions when it's super high emotional like that. So,
Yeah, the other thing I would like to also offer is to really give yourself compassion and grace, because that initial shock, like, could send, a lot of times you're a puddle on the floor, right? Like you can't get out of bed, and then you start to judge yourself, and then you start to judge your spouse, and the judgment just becomes this overpowering thing. And so really being able to step back and just give yourself compassion and grace and allow yourself to grieve. And we didn't talk about this, but this is one of the really important pieces that people forget, is that divorce is a death of the marriage.
100%.
And we don't treat it like a death. And so it needs to be mourned. You need to give yourself the space to grieve the marriage ending, to grieve all the loss that comes with that, and really understanding that, and understanding that there's no timeline for that, and grief may come in waves, and just every when it comes, to allow it and to give yourself that compassion and grace is really, really important.
Yeah. Be nice to yourself, right? Be kind to yourself,
Mhm.
right? I think is so important in this realm, is just to be kind to yourself. So, but anyways, I'm sure we could talk for multiple hours. We'll have to do this again, and
Absolutely.
talk about more topics. But before we jump off here, let everybody know they've heard you, they've heard your process, they heard your story. Maybe they want to reach out, they want to connect with you. Tell everybody, all our listeners, how they can reach out to you, and how they can get connected with you.
Yeah. So you can find me on my website, which is potomaccoaching.com. You can follow me on social media. I am active on LinkedIn, where we met. I'm active on Instagram, on Facebook. I do have a Facebook support group. which you can find through my personal or my business Facebook pages, all with my name, Sharri Freedman. I am your divorce coach on Instagram. So that's, you don't even need to remember my name, your divorce coach.
Love that.
And those are great ways. And then there's links that you can, find me through that. I have a free download, avoiding, the ultimate guide to avoiding the 6 biggest divorce mistakes. So if you go on over to my Instagram and to my link tree, you can find, the links for all of that. I also have a weekly happiness hits for people. So there's lots of different ways that you can connect with me. And then I do offer a free consultation. So if you want to chat more about, whether or not we'd be a good fit to work together and discover kind of the different ways that we can do that, you can schedule a free consultation and no obligation, and, see if we're a good fit.
I love that. I love that. And I'll put all that in the podcast notes. There are people, all the websites they can get you on, and all your different socials and stuff like that. So if you didn't have a chance to write them down, don't worry, they're in the show notes. You can definitely take a look at those. So, but anyways, Sharri, I thank you so much for devoting some of your time today for me and my listeners. It was truly impactful. There was a lot of good information that was shared today, a lot of great thoughts. And I know you're doing a lot of good work for people, and you're helping a lot of people through a really, really shitty time in their life. So I applaud you for that. And I just thank you again for being on the show.
Well, thank you.
So, but anyways, guys, hopefully you enjoyed today's show. If you did, let us know in the comment section. Make sure to reach out to Sharri for all those needs that you might have. Just have a conversation with her, see where it goes. So, but anyways, have a good one. We will talk to you soon. Have a good one.